Yeah.
Yeah, rolling, rolling, rolling. And here we are once again, everyone. A new month, a new theme here in the spoiler room. Thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink. I've got not your father's root beer.
Nice.
So yeah, it's very tasty. They actually brought back the old label. They had kind of a boring label for a while, but they've brought back their original label, and I was quite happy with it. A dapper man on the label, you know. And speaking of dapper men, we were talking about dapper men today, as we're taking a different theme, something you might not expect. The month is called Stocking Up, and what that means is prepare yourself. It's more interesting than you may think. We're talking 4 films involving Wall Street and the stock market, which, trust me, folks, I think I've picked 4 films that should be interesting discussions, including the one that we're talking about tonight, Wall Street from 1987, Oliver Stone, a slew of stars. And speaking of stars, I've got one with me here today. He's my co-host, right hand man, keeps coming back for more. None other than Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing great. I came dressed for the occasion. I'm wearing a robe because it's cold in my basement, but I'm wearing a green shirt because green is the color of money.
It is color of money, and money spawns greed, and greed is good, according to Mr. Gecko of
And
Wall
money never
Street.
sleeps.
And money never sleeps. That's exactly right. So, since you're familiar with the movie, Ian, why not give the synopsis of Wall Street?
Well, Wall Street is about a young, ambitious stock trader named Bud Fox, played by Charlie Sheen,
Yep.
and he works in this little office where he like does these little kind of like nipping at the heels deals, makes a comfortable living. He's on his way up, but he really has ambitions to get into bed with the big boys to like make the insane amounts of cash. He's particularly obsessed with this mover and shaker named Gordon Gecko, played by Michael Douglas, and he kind of works his way into Michael Douglas's or Gordon Gecko's organization, and watching the movie this time, I realize it's essentially the devil's advocate minus the supernatural.
It really is. It really is in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, so he basically it's the classic story. He works his way up. He's seduced by the power and the money and the women and the amenities, but he flies a little too close to the sun. He has some problems with his father, played by Martin Sheen, who is like a mechanic and a union rep on an airline that Bud uses as leverage to basically buy his way into Gecko's favor. And that causes a lot of problems when the airline is Bud essentially uses insider information about a lawsuit that once it's settled is going to allow the airline to go from like a small regional airline to be competing with the big boys. So that opens up opportunities to like, hey, this is the big emerging stock and everyone's going to get rich, and people do get rich, and then people get really poor really fast, and there's backstabbing stabbing and boardroom intrigue and all that good stuff. And directed by Oliver Stone, co-written by Oliver Stone. um this is the second time I've watched this movie in the last like 10 years, probably.
Mm.
I love it a lot more now than I did because I think I understand it a bit more. It is kind of hard to follow if you're not in the game. I'm certainly not a player, but I think I was just paying attention more. So yeah, it's a crazy movie. It's really good.
Well, I mean, and this is why I'm very interested with this month and looking at these films, because I've seen this was the film that I had seen once. After a while, though, I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it later on when it was on direct to video, because it was one that kept coming up in circles and that. And I like Oliver Stone, and the cast in this is just insane. Who's all in this, even in the minor parts.
Hmm.
So I finally watched it and I enjoyed it okay, but I'm with you. I think I enjoy it a lot more now. But this was one of the many, and we talked about one in our 52 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, Quicksilver, one of the many weirdly obsessed. There was this 80s obsession with the stock market. I'm not sure why. I haven't looked up historical stuff, but the 80s seem to be obsessed with it because there were a lot of movies like this involving the stock market. And in all honesty, watching this, I still don't quite understand. But
Well,
I understand concepts. I don't understand how it all fully works,
mhm.
but you don't have to because that's not really essential to it. You just the performances here are what helps sell it.
Yeah, and I mean, and there was something about I'm not exactly sure when the switch flipped, but
Mhm.
I mean, stock and Wall Street, the obsession was all over 80s pop culture. I mean, even you look at Family Ties, the show
Uh-huh.
that made Michael Keaton. I was going to say Michael J. Fox. Um,
Yeah.
he played a young, a teenage Republican who was obsessed with making money and investing and things like that. It was around this time, maybe a couple years earlier or no, it was a couple years later that Bret Easton Ellis wrote American Psycho, the novel
Right.
about
Yeah.
Patrick
Mhm.
Bateman, who was an investment kind of Wall Street guy, and he was writing, I think, working on the book right around this time.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was. I think a lot of it, and Gordon Gekko kind of gets to the heart of this in the movie when he's talking about it's if you know what you're doing, you can get in and you can make a ton of money, and it's not really even work because what they're doing is fabricating money out of thin air. It's a giant confidence game on a global scale with these markets, and it's really easy to make a lot of money and to lose a lot of money.
Well, and a lot of the mistakes were you make a lot of money and then you kept the money there. Some of the people who made money would make a lot of money initially, then pull that money out, put it in something that might not be as lucrative but safer, and then they lived off like interest in that, and they didn't play the market anymore. But it was those who would rely on that money from their stocks in order to do their living that ended up causing people to get in a lot of trouble. And I think part of it was the yuppie culture because in the 80s you had yuppie. That was the big, oh, the boomers that we call now were yuppies.
Some of them, yeah, the
Some of them.
young urban professional.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're easy to make fun of, but I mean, I don't know. There is something. It's easy to see how this kind of lifestyle would be alluring. But what I also loved about what Stone did is he made it look just as ridiculous in its
Hmm.
allure. Something I don't think I picked up on the first time I watched it. There's a scene where okay, so Bud, when he gets really rich, he moves into this like almost $1 million apartment, and he has his new girlfriend played by Daryl Hannah. Her name's Darian. She's an interior decorator who has terrible taste in art and decor, but she decorates his apartment. He has a cocktail party that Gordon Gekko comes to. There's a great scene where he's got a little plate of hors d'oeuvres and he goes to set it down on the coffee table and it falls on the floor because it's a glass coffee table, and the gimmick is it doesn't have glass.
It
So you
doesn't
can't
have
actually
glass.
put
Yeah.
anything on it. I'm like, that's perfect. That is everything you need to know about Wall Street.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole theme of excessiveness, and we're going to run into this with the rest of the movies that we talk about in various forms this month, was just, at its peak in the 80s. And so 87, yeah. And Oliver Stone had something personal because his dad, I think, was a stockbroker for a number of years. So he's speaking from experience, and you almost feel like he's pulling from people that he either knew or his dad knew. Because
Hmm.
these people, as outrageous as they might seem, feel real. Yeah, I mean, Gecko, and this is what I like about Wall Street is it's very easy it would have been very easy for this film to really take what some films of this genre would do is go to the extreme. Like suddenly Gecko is like out to destroy Fox as the things progress and Fox gets young, and then Fox kind of starts turning the tables as he starts growing a conscience. And then, like Gecko turns like into this really like mustache twirling type of villain, but he doesn't here. I mean, there's still tension. There's still you get the arc of Fox learning Oh yeah, this does have consequences, because one of the things that Fox tries to do throughout when he sells things is no one gets hurt. This is a safe investment. No one gets hurt until Gecko pulls the rug out from under him and people are going to get hurt because Gecko's just going to dissolve the company because he can make a serious bank off of selling the real estate.
Right. And, he does turn into that mustache twirling villain, but we never see it. That all happens off screen
Right,
because
right.
there is a great, and we're jumping ahead here, and this is the spoiler room, but at the end, Bud Fox decides to screw Gordon Gekko on this airline deal because he found out that the airline that his father works for, as I mentioned, was going to become a major player. So Gordon bought the entire thing and basically installed Bud on the board of the airline. And he thought, yeah, we're going to get in here. We're going to make a ton of money. But then Gecko says essentially, well, he looked at some of the reports and he decided, you know what, I just want to liquidate the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a casual thing that Bud was like heartbroken because of his dad and all of his friends. He grew up around all these union mechanic guys, realizing that the entire airline and all the buildings were going to be made into condos, like the hangars, and the parts are going to be sold in Mexico for scrap, essentially. So Bud devises this plan to screw Gecko out of his investment and allow a rival that Gecko had screwed to take over the company and appoint Bud Fox, as put him in charge still. So there's that phone call that Bud gives to Gordon, and he basically says, "Ha ha, I got you." And then the next scene, the next day, Bud walks into his office at the little small firm, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing, Alice?" or whatever her name is. And everyone's like looking at him like they're all ashen faced. They're like, "Oh, buddy." And he goes in, and the SEC is there along with the New York police ready to arrest him. And you realize that off screen, Gecko, and what very well could have been 1, 2, 3 scenes in any other movie, Gecko just made a series of phone calls, probably told someone, "Here's where you find the evidence. Go get this kid." Now, there was a bit of a double cross, but at the end, and this doesn't really come out until the sequel, Money Never Sleeps, that Gecko had gotten arrested and did some time. But yeah, it's a very smart film. I love that Gordon Gekko is a very human character. He's not the top dog. In fact, Terrence Stamp's character is, I can't remember what he said. He's like, "I'm 60 times richer than you are." And you look at Gecko, he said something like, "I made, $800,000 a day or a month or something like that." I'm like, holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah, that is what's interesting, is that you get the impression first, because it's all being told from Fox's perspective, that Gecko is the top dog until you meet Terrence Stamp's character, and you just realize Gecko is actually kind of middle upper tier. Like in his circles, he's big, but in like the grand scheme of things, he's not really top dog. But he also is quite happy where he's at too, because he can play both kind of safely. I think that's why Gecko, the impression you get from Gecko is, while he likes money and he's greed, he found his like niche, his alley, to where occasionally he can poke Terrence Stamp's character, but he can still be seen as a big dog by a lot of the lower stock traders. So even though he's kind of upper middle tier, he's quite comfortable where he's at, outside of always wanting more money.
Right. And it's weird that you just but accurately describe his position as sort of upper middle tier, because he still makes several $100 million a year in 80s money. And I think that the key difference is that Terrence Stamp's character, Larry, I can't remember his last name, but he is politically connected. He was recently knighted by the Queen of England. He's a mover and shaker in like global finance and politics. And he's, as we mentioned, he's much richer than Gecko. And I like that Stone plays these, and also the co-writer Stanley Weiser play with these kinds of shades of characters, because you see Gordon Gekko is sort of presented as this villain, and then we meet the guy that he had screwed out of a big deal. So like, oh well, maybe this is the sympathetic character we're supposed to, get on his side because he's sort of
Mhm.
against Gordon Gekko. But then there's that great exchange at the house party where he's like, don't, I remember what you did with the companies that you took over. How many people did you lay off when you liquidated these
Mhm.
companies? 6,000 people here, 4,000 people here. So don't get all high and mighty about this one company that I'm thinking about doing this to. You've got blood on your hands too.
Yeah, it there's a lot of fun dialogue, and you could pull it off and keep it interesting, even though it's mostly like talky in that. Um, because of the director that you have behind it and this cast. And now we've mentioned it, Terrence Stamp, your major players. You've got, Charlie Sheen, you've got, Michael Douglas. We mentioned, I think this was a big deal too at the time because this was the first film Charlie Sheen and Martin Sheen were in a movie together. I think this was the first one that, at least that was wide release, that they were both in a movie together, because that was a big deal. And Martin Sheen is playing Charlie Sheen's dad. And
Yeah.
so that actually helps though, because the dynamic between the father and son, if you watch enough movies, you can see when performers are having fun. And these two are enjoying the hell out of acting with each other because their banter feels so just a little bit more genuine because
I see what you're saying, but I also, and maybe this is just me,
Mm.
kind of cringing at some. I think Charlie Sheen is a good actor, but
Sure.
he's not his dad. He's not even his brother
No.
Emilio
No.
Estevez. I think,
No. Emilio's
I
better. I'll say Emilio's better.
well, I think the thing is like Charlie Sheen proved himself to be a very fine actor comedically. The
Mhm.
Hot Shots movies, Two
Yeah.
and a Half Men, regardless what you think of
Mhm.
that show, he's very good in it. I mean, it had to be. It ran for like 11 or
Yeah.
13 seasons or something. When I see him do drama, especially when he's like yelling at his dad, I'm like, I've
Mhm.
seen Martin Sheen do that yell and that indignant outrage in movies
Yeah.
before, and this ain't it.
Yeah.
He's like the son is trying to be like, "I'm gonna be just like you,
Yeah.
dad."
Yeah.
There's that scene in the elevator after Martin Sheen
Oh,
embarrasses
yeah.
Ed Fox,
Yeah.
and the camera's like switching between them. And I'm
Mhm.
like watching Martin Sheen's like understated heartbreak and disappointment, and then you cut over to Charlie Sheen, just like, "Dad, how could you?" It's almost like Keanu Reeves.
A
It's like,
little bit,
How could
yeah.
you embarrass
Yeah.
me in front of those people?" And he's like,
Yeah.
Martin Sheen's just like dying inside, like, "You called me
Yeah.
a failure, and I never took my shot." And like, "You never took your shot, Dad." I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
God."
No, I mean, Charlie Sheen's acting as a bit, but this was still young Charlie Sheen, and he got picked quite a bit, some of his roles, because he was very good looking gentleman. And I mean, part of the role was because of his looks. He had the suave young stockbroker look. That's why he got chosen here. Apparently, they were going to choose Cruise, but it's an Oliver Stone film, and he liked Sheen from Platoon. So
Mhm.
we get this. And there's some people say, well, it would have been better with Cruise. And I'm like, let's not forget Cruz was a bit young yet too at this time. You know what I'm saying? He probably would have did better than Charlie, but there's not a guarantee that he would have necessarily been that much better. I don't know.
I think the problem with Tom Cruise, I mean, it's in because I'd seen something about that too. Um, this is the year after Top Gun. I
Yeah.
don't see how you go from Maverick down to, oh, I'm just kind of like an upcoming like wannabe stockbroker. I'm kind of a nerd. I'll sit up all night reading charts on the computer, but I also want to be a mover and shaker. I don't think, yeah, maybe if this had been a few years earlier, or certainly any time before Top Gun, maybe that would work. In terms of the caliber of acting, yeah, I think Cruise could have pulled it off, but it's weird because I think Charlie Sheen, for as flawed as his performance is, it still kind of works because you don't look at him and think automatically, "Oh, he's the really suave, good-looking guy that's going to rise to the top." He looks like a wannabe when you first see him, and all throughout the movie, he constantly looks like he's
Mhm.
trying to prove himself and fit in. Whereas when you look at Tom Cruise, even
He'd
at the
fit in.
beginning, yeah, even at the beginning of Risky Business, when he's still like this awkward high schooler, you're like, oh yeah, he's got it. He just
high,
doesn't quite know it yet. Yeah.
high schooler, high
Right.
schooler.
Yeah.
sorry. I chuckle at that with Risky Business. It's just like he's a high schooler, and we're like, he's short, but I'm not buying that he's a high schooler. Oh, apparently, according to some trivia from Ibidem, they had their choice of either Jack Lemmon or Martin Sheen to play opposite Fox for his dad, and they went with his dad.
I Jack Lemmon, you said?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe I believe Martin Sheen bent over that airplane,
Yeah.
work with the wrench more than I would Jack Lemmon. Love Jack Lemmon, but yeah, Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was watching I thought I was watching Martin Sheen doing like in a docudrama about what he does when he's not appearing in movies. I'm like, I
Yeah.
believe that guy works on planes and runs a union. He's so
Oh
good
yeah,
at
no,
this.
I mean, he is so good, and he's so good at this as the blue collar worker. He's supposed to be the counterpoint to his son, who's trying to be the young executive, the up and comer type of guy. But Martin Sheen, yeah, he's so good in this role. Even though you don't get a lot of screen time, he's just, yeah, you just love every scene he's in. But where I was going with that is just that the chemistry between them, because they are father and son, I think they could, let loose a little more. At least the emotion between them, and that the connection or whatnot was there, obviously, for Natural, and I think it works for this. But yeah, Martin Sheen's definitely the better, though Charlie was a bit young in this. And then Michael Douglas, for as much as we like him playing good guys, he plays bad guys really well.
And that's the thing. Like, okay, I mentioned Devil's Advocate. You had Al Pacino literally playing Satan. Gordon Gekko is a bad guy, but you can almost see like this. You can see how he was perhaps warped by this business, this life that he kind of, they got sucked in and transformed from something else. I think at one point he said he saw himself in Bud Fox. So, yeah, I mean, like, because when I watch him and I listen to him, it's really hard for me to disagree with what he's talking about.
Right?
Even when he's talking about like liquidating companies and laying off people and stuff, it makes financial sense for the type of business that he's in, even though it's got horrible real world consequences for those families. But it's like, there is like that naivete on Bud's part. Like, what did you think this was? Like, no one's going to get hurt when you're making hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. As unscrupulous as he was, and as unscrupulous as Fox was, because he wanted to get in good with Gekko, at the same time, they did include people in on their investments and made money for them, because Fox did that when he got in good with Gekko and had the in on a couple of investments as part of the cover up to remove suspicion. Gekko told Fox, tell your buddies about this, because that way the trade commission, or the stock watch company as it was at the time, wouldn't be suspicious that Gekko was doing something under the table or something, insider trading, because everybody would be doing the same thing. So it would cover, which, on one hand, okay, that's wicked, but on the other hand, those people are benefiting from it. So
right. And James Spader shows up in this movie in one of the rare roles where he doesn't play a scumbag. He plays a really good, nice guy. Like, he's an old lawyer friend of Bud's from college. And he's one of the guys that Bud first tries to get information from. And then he brings him into this web of like, hey, I'm going to give you some tips. Just, keep it quiet. And I love like their last scene together. Bud comes to visit, Roger is his character's name at the office. He's like, look, Roger says, no more lunches, no more phone calls. We just got to shut this down. It's been great, but I'm getting really cold feet about this. And I love that indication that the walls are closing in. Like everything kind of
Yes.
slowly falls apart. You can watch all the puzzle pieces moving. So good.
Well, that's the thing is he plays this so well. You can see why Michael Douglas got Academy Award nomination. In fact, I think this was his only award nomination that he got. Um, uh, and he's so good in it because he gives you this layered character without. He could easily go completely overboard, and I guess that's where I was saying that he's not necessarily mustache twirling because you're right. He plays this as just a very a guy who has no morals, but a straight businessman. Everything with him is just business. Like he says, he doesn't really get attached to people. It's just business. Even when he's talking to Darian, Daryl Hannah's character, who is kind of falling for Bud. And he even kind of handles their relationship kind of like a business transaction more so than any type of emotional connection.
Well, and the screenplay is smart enough to keep it about the business and the Wall Street stuff because there was a line where Gecko and Darian are walking down the street after this art auction, and he's like, I can't remember who said it to who, but they're like, Bud can never know about us, like that we were ever a thing.
Darian said that. Yeah.
Right. And so I was expecting at some point later, like Gecko's gonna throw that out, like, oh, I've slept with your girlfriend, and it's gonna be like this weird love triangle thing or something. But no, it's strictly about business, not the personal.
Right. Yeah. It was really interesting that they took that approach with it. Because you could tell there's something between him and Darian, but not quite sure what. But when you see her start getting all friendly and 80s silhouette sex scene,
oh God, Charlie Sheen even overacts the thrusting. Like, oh my God. He is like Patrick Bateman in that scene in American Psycho. He's got the two hookers and he's like modeling himself in the mirror practically. Oh,
like, ooh, yeah. But yeah, they keep the romance even to the minimum. Oliver Stone really crafts this movie in such a way to where the focus continually stays on the business aspect and their business practices, or the undermining, the illegal stuff they're doing. He keeps it really focused on that. You add these other elements, but like you said, never really fully explored. We do have one blowout between Bud and Darian, but that's when Bud is losing it because he's realizing he's being taken for a ride by Gecko with the air part. And she's just like looking at it as business too. That's the thing is Darian, there's not much difference between her and Gecko in a lot of ways as far as their approach to relationships.
right. But I mean, even like because Sean Young is in the movie playing Gecko's wife. It's a marriage that doesn't mean anything because
Right.
Gecko's sleeping around with Darian, and also there's a scene on a private jet where there's the woman who casually walks.
Oh, she just walks by with
and
the
then
look. Yeah.
right, and then she walks back into the private room, and then after the conversation, you just see Gecko. Like I had to rewind it because it was so subtle. It wasn't
It
even like,
was.
"Hey, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go screw that woman." It's just like, "I'm just gonna go in that back room here." Oh, that's right, a lady walked in there alone a minute ago.
Mhm.
But you could very easily see Darian becoming Mrs. Bud Fox and having that sort of transactional, a marriage of business and
Right.
convenience. But the problem is because Gecko had built her career probably
Mhm.
with some strings attached, but given her all her connections and her clients and all that stuff, she had made it on her, she made a business out of it using those contacts. So she wasn't completely reliant on him, but she also knew where her bread was buttered. So when Bud is like, I'm gonna, screw Gordon Gecko, and she's like, no, don't cross him. If you cross him, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
It's almost like her fear slash loyalty to Gordon Gecko was all consuming. Like she would
Mhm.
love Bud up to a certain point until he decided to do that, and she couldn't
Right.
be a part of it. Not even necessarily from a moral thing, but just because, like,
No.
no, you know what that guy can do to you.
Yeah, she was very real. She was very realistic in what her relationship was with everybody, pretty much, and where she stood and how the real world worked. She wasn't really in you know, any fantasy of, oh, I'm going to run away with you. We'll leave all this behind. We'll just live on the money that we have or whatnot. In fact, Bud is the one it brings that up. And she's like, no, are you crazy? I've got a really good thing going on in New York, you know?
Yeah, like at one point, when they're on, I think they're on the beach or something like that.
Yeah.
Darian says, "If I could have anything, this would almost do." And
Yeah.
she's like talking about the world. I'm like, wow. Uh, there's so many great lines in this movie. There's like if you want a snapshot of the problems with capitalism out of
Mhm.
control, watch Wall Street. There's so many good like bumper sticker lines in this movie. It's great.
There's great bumper sticker lines. And what's funny is watching it, I'm like, some of the discussions they have, especially when they get into the union folks and they start talking about class and that, I'm like, shit, that still can apply to today. I mean, this film, until you get into the technology part, if you ignore those parts, this film could easily still play today and be, almost as meaningful with the way it's done, because the themes and such that come up in here are still topical today.
Oh yeah, and the famous line of "greed is good" comes from an amazing scene where Gecko goes to the stock meeting of or the shareholders meeting of a company called Teldar Paper,
Mhm.
and he's looking to, I can't remember the specifics because there's a few big companies in this movie, but essentially the Teldar, the head of their board, is railing against Gordon Gecko because he thinks that he's going to try and basically take control of the company and liquidate it and
Mhm.
screw everybody over. And then Gordon gets his chance to speak, and he basically says, look, if you want to look at who's screwing you over, you know, your company made XX dollars this, past year,
Yeah.
and most of that went to the 22 people sitting behind me. It didn't go to you guys. Like these are fat cats making multiple tens of millions of dollars a year, and I don't know why you're looking at me like I'm the villain. So he's like, and you could see the people kind of like starting to nod their heads
Mhm.
in the audience. They're not quite sure, like, wait, I thought you were supposed to be the bad guy. And he is a slime ball, but he's also can wear that suit of populism to get what he wants because he knows all the angles of all the arguments.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because he points out all the flaws with that board. He's like, you have 23 VPs. He's like, and they all get a salary of $200,000 last year. He's like, how much of that did go to you guy? Yeah, I mean, you're right. He's a very smart businessman. This isn't like one of those to where this character is crazy, where you could see they could easily play the angle, that he's got some kind of vice. He doesn't really have a major vice. He's actually got a little kid who he seems to actually adore, a young boy, his son. Sean Young doesn't show up much in here, but there's reasons for that behind the scenes, for it.
Was there drama?
Well, there is drama. Well, um, apparently she tried to fight hard to play Darian. She kept telling
Oh,
Oliver Storm that she needed to play Darian, but she would show up late to set and apparently not have her lines really. So that's why her role is minuscule in this, is because she was already having some behind the scenes issues and drama. And I'm not going to say Daryl Hannah was probably the best choice for this role either, but she's definitely better than Sean Young was, because Sean Young in this, she's barely in this film.
well, but yeah, I remember because it was a few years after this that Sean Young famously like dressed up in the Catwoman suit and tried to like lobby Tim Burton to play the Michelle Pfeiffer role in Batman
Yeah.
Returns, like dodged a bullet there. Man, that's I can't stand it when those behind the scenes stories are fascinating, but again, you're like, just stop.
and yeah, I guess Oliver Stone later admitted that he probably miscast Daryl Hannah, but he was too proud to say he made a mistake. But he didn't want Sean Young either. I mean, Daryl is okay. I think the tough part for me with Daryl Hannah's Darian character is just Daryl Hannah does so well at playing a very nice, very charismatic, very connected character. To see her try to play a little bit colder character was a little bit tough because I keep seeing her in most of the roles she was in, which is more of the the warmer roles than what this one kind of called for.
Yeah, I mean it's weird because I kind of like I think she was perfectly matched with Charlie Sheen because there was something
Right.
off
Yeah.
about both their performances.
Yeah.
But I think about her role in Kill Bill,
Mhm.
15 years later or whatever would have been.
Right.
I think if you had had that caliber of acting infused into the Darien role, which is, that role was a little bit because she was an assassin, she was a killer, but she still had that kind of like down to business, cut the shit aloofness and that, kind of sexy allure. That it just, yeah, I think she had to grow into that. This is probably just another case of an early performance.
It is. I mean, well, I mean, just like you mentioned with Charlie Sheen, I think if these two performers are cast in these same roles, but like 10 years later,
Mm-hmm.
they're getting nominated as well. And that they would have done far better than they were a little, I think, too young because this is a big movie. If you look at it, you've got a big director. I remember there was promotions for this film a lot. You've got the cast for sure, you know. And don't get me wrong, I don't take this wrong, please, folks. I like Daryl Hannah's performance in a lot of stuff. It's just for what this character called for at the point of where she was at. I think it was maybe just a little bit out of where we were at least used to seeing her, and maybe a little bit out of the range of her. I mean, Charlie Sheen was barely holding on to this. I mean, you watch enough stock market. Kevin Bacon's Quicksilver character was probably a little better fit than Charlie Sheen in this because yeah, it was a little bit of a tough sell. I still bought into it, but it was a bit of a tough sell. But I think that's the director. They had Oliver Stone who knew how to direct, so he could direct them.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver Stone kind of gets a weird rap because of like conspiracy theory stuff, and I think a lot of that came out of JFK. But yeah, I mean, this movie, Platoon, which you mentioned earlier, which was also kind of based on his personal experiences of Vietnam. He's a hell of a director and a hell of a writer, and he knows how to get the most out of the film making down to like editing decisions, to getting the most, I think, the best performances that he could out of the people that he
Right.
cast.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's such a, I don't know. My wife asked me, she's like, because I rented this from Amazon. She's like, "Don't you own Wall Street?" I'm like, "No." And after watching it, I'm like,
Why don't
need
I
to,
own this?
I need to fix that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
I've done
I
that.
only saw the sequel, Money Never Sleeps, once, and I remember hating it, but I can't remember why. I'd have to go
Shia
back and
LaBeouf.
watch it again. Yeah. No, I like. I'm a Shia LaBeouf fan, like legitimately. I think he's a
Mhm.
great actor, but he's also someone I think has been racked with a lot of personal problems. That the publicity, unfortunately, overrides the talent in a lot of cases. But
Shy needed a better manager. Let's put it that way. He needed maybe.
well, if you watch, I think it was called Honey Boy, which came out a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
That will give you some insight as to what happened. Like,
Mhm.
like his dad was his manager, and his dad was all kinds of fucked up.
Yeah, yeah. But we've mentioned this cast, and I keep teasing about the supporting cast. But I mean, you have in here, you've got John C. McGinley in here as Todd, as Bud Fox's buddy in the trenches. I love him. He's great. He's a great, he's one of those where you always go. Hal Holbrook shows up in here. I mean, it just there's so many actors where you're like, oh, that guy, in like small roles.
Yeah, James Karen, like James Karen
Yeah.
and Hal Holbrook working in an office together at like they're almost around the same age, you get the sense,
Yeah.
but they're at two very different points in their careers. Like I could watch just a movie about this little like corner trading firm. So good.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, James Spader showing up, and you're just like, wait, and he's not in like a weird, kinky, bizarre role. He's played it as a straight lawyer. What?
I mean, yeah, like if you told me back in 1986, like there's an Oliver Stone movie coming out called Wall Street and James Spader's in it, I'm like, oh, he's playing the yuppie douchebag day trader guy. But no, he's playing one
No.
of the few honest, semi-honest, but persuadable men in this picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I remember this being the big picture that that was they promoted this a lot, and you can see why. They had a budget behind it, but again, dealing with the stock market, how do you make it interesting? But they make it interesting, you know, in an interest in a different way. Oliver Stone manages to give you drama that feels a bit realistic, which I think helps with this film. You know, no one is too caricatures
No.
at all in this film. They all feel like people. If that sounds weird, they're not like blown up like beyond like overacting or exaggerated at all in this.
Right. And I think to that point, it is this is definitely a movie you have to pay attention to and you have to like jump into the stream and follow it all the way to the end. You can't drift off or let your mind wander because there's no hand holding as to like here's how the stock market works. Here's what shorting and trading and undercutting all that stuff. Here's what this scene means. Here's what this deal means. You just have to kind of infer it. And like you said at the beginning of it, at the end of Wall Street, I understood what had happened. I didn't necessarily know how it all happened down to
Right.
like the minute details, but I got an idea. There was a movie that came out like 7-8 years ago now called The Big Short. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know if you
watched
saw
that.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
That was another excellent movie, kind of about the same thing, except 20 years later. But they did these like nice, funny interstitials, like Margot Robbie in a bathtub, like a bubble bath, explaining what shorting stocks means,
Yeah.
as a way to like get the audience on the same page. Uh, but in Wall Street, it's very realistic to the point where, like, even the old man mechanic guy, he understands how all this stuff works and he understands not to get involved with it. But at no point is he sitting there giving this big, long expository thing about how, how or why what Bud is doing is wrong. He's just like, I think you're making a big mistake.
Yeah, it's just interesting how this film comes together, and it wasn't really in my wheelhouse when it came out, fully admit. And like I said, when I watched it a few years after it came out on rental or whatnot, didn't quite get it. Now watching this, I loved this film.
Oh yeah, you got to be an adult to watch this,
You do.
unless you are Alex P. Keaton and you're a
Right,
teenage,
yeah.
Republican stock genius. But but yeah, I think, and as you mentioned, I can't say that it's timeless because I don't know if they had these problems back in the 60s or if we'll still have these problems in 2050. But for right now, it's a movie that you can watch. And aside from like Michael Douglas is on the beach and he's using his cell phone. It's the giant Zach Morris brick phone,
The
right?
very first time they showed a cell phone on camera on a movie,
Really?
supposedly, according to trivia. Yeah, I looked it up earlier. Apparently, it's the first time technology actually plays a bit of a role, more so than I expected in this movie. They talk about the computer and how it can trace things, and they actually talk a lot about technology in this, far more than I thought they would.
Yeah, and it's nice because one of the things they do just explain just visually is the stock ticker.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The
Hmm.
green stock ticker going by, I'm actually able to follow like what's going on and how it scrolls and you see the prices go up and down. Because when you're watching this stuff on TV, it's literally just like a green blur flying by your face. Like I don't even know what I'm looking at. I felt like, and they probably slowed it down, I
Oh
would
yeah,
imagine
yeah.
in this case, but I'm like, I appreciate that because I can actually kind of tell what's going on. And it's thrilling because you're watching something go down like 5 points and realize that every one of those points like represents dollars and how many shares people
Mhm.
have. And like you can just imagine people like Bud Fox like sweating it when they realize that their entire investment is going down the drain or they're being screwed.
Yeah, I mean, it's directed enough and uh, to where you get excited. You may not completely understand what's going on, but you're still feeling the excitement, and that's Oliver Stone being Oliver Stone with his direction in this. You know, yeah, this is an interesting movie. It's engrossing, even though it's dialogue and it's about stocks. I never got bored with this film. You know,
And
it
it's
was interesting,
yeah, and it's 2 hours and 6 minutes long. I mean,
and it moves. It
it
moves though.
it does move. I mean, you go from, A to B to, Z eventually,
Mhm.
but you feel like you've gotten a complete story of these characters and what they're kind of going for, and even the side characters feel purposeful.
Mhm.
I think anchored partially by the script and also by the performances. It's just like I look at this and I hate to keep ragging on it, but I look at this and Indiana Jones 5, which is 24 minutes longer than this movie,
Mhm.
and I feel like much more happens in this, even though it's not as like swashbuckling and there's no car chases or shootouts or anything. But yeah, I'll watch this 20 times before I watch Indy 5 again.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Uh and if you folks will indulge me, I've got the quote that you mentioned about Gecko. And it was when he gives this speech that made me realize that this film, and you mentioned it earlier, Ian, it could apply today. And it tells you the good and bad of the fact of how much has and hasn't changed over the years. Here's his speech, folks. The richest 1% of this country owns half our country's wealth, $5 trillion. One third of that comes from hard work. Two-thirds comes from inheritance, interest on interest accumulating to widows and idiot sons. And what I do, stock and real estate speculation. It's bullshit. You got 90% of American public out there with little to no net worth. I create nothing. I own. We make rules, pal. The news, war, peace, famine, upheaval, price per paperclip. We pick that rabbit out of the hat while everybody sits out there wondering how the hell we did it. Now, you're not naive enough to think that we're living in a democracy, are you, buddy? It's the free market, and you're part of it. You've got a killer instinct. Stick around, pal. I've got a lot to teach you. It's amazing how much of that dialogue applies to today's.
Except that that 50% number is way off because it's
Right, yeah.
way more as
Now
far
it's
as
way
the and
more, yeah.
it's not even the 1%. It's the the
Right.
0.1% and the ultra elites.
But I mean,
Um,
even back then, though, I mean, it was prevalent and in conversations even back then, separation between classes, and it's even more prevalent in the discussions now. So I just found it interesting when he gave the speech. I'm like, it sounds very similar to some of the speeches and stuff you see today being given about
oh yeah.
wealth and separation of wealth and such. And yeah, it's like I think the only thing in this film that it made me smile, and it almost I don't think Wall Street is meant to be satirical, but at the same time, Oliver Stone is having fun and poking a little fun at the situations because at one point we literally get Bud who
I
needs to
think
get
I
in.
know what you're saying. Oh wait, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
At one point we get Bud uh wanting to get information to get in good with Gecko. He got in there the first time, but he needs to get more information. But Gecko this time didn't give him any leads. He had to go find information on his own. So he ends up investing in a cleaner service so he could pose as a cleaner worker to get into the offices of his lawyer buddies so he could get the insider information. It's like the small section, but it's the only section that felt like
It was very much like Mission Impossible type stuff. In fact, I was reminded of Mission Impossible 1 with Tom Cruise and Emilio Estevez, who was
Mhm.
playing the guy who I think was kind of doing almost the same thing and got crushed in the elevator. Um, yeah, the one bit where I rolled my eyes and almost threw up my mouth is later in the film. Bud Fox has the world at his feet, but he goes out onto the balcony like it's nighttime, like pre-dawn.
Yeah.
And he just sits there and just goes, "Who am I?" I'm like, "Oh my God, no."
I did too. I'm like, especially everything that happened up until that point in the film, we're like, now you do the self-reflection. I like not the never mind the one as unscrupulous thing you did, which was follow Terrence Stamp's character all around, Larry Wildman, as he's called, and basically pull, screw him over through Gecko. And then you do this other thing where you literally invest in a truck company just so you could sneak in and get information from your your college buddies lawyer offices, because back then a lot more stuff in file cabinets than on computer. That didn't bother him. No, later on in the film is like, oh, who am I? After he finally uh consummates his relationship with Daryl Hannah's Darian, then he's out on the balcony going, ah, yeah, and I'm just like, now is the reflection, and Darian's like, come back to bed, and he's just like, who am I? And like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, it's partially that, but it's partially just the delivery. Like that, Tom
Yeah,
Cruise could pull that line off.
yes,
Charlie
you could.
Sheen, it just sounds like an Eternity for Men commercial. Like, just no, that doesn't work.
It sounded like Calvin Klein. It was like a Calvin Klein commercial. It's like,
Yeah.
you make it black and white and have the same scene where Bud Fox is in his boxers and he's on the balcony, and you make it black and white. And you kind of do these kind of creative angles, and then you just have him stare out and he goes, who am I? And then you go, Calvin Klein for Men.
No, Tiger's Blood by Calvin Klein.
There was an ice cream shop downtown in Point here who they sold a shake called Tiger's Blood shake.
No, it's it's legitimate flavor. There's like a snow cone icy vendor around town, and I've seen a few of them that they have a Tiger's Blood like icy. It's very good.
It is. It was very good. I got the shake. I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good for a Tiger's Blood shake. No offense to Tiger Power out there, Tony. We love you. Not at all. No, this is Mr. Charlie Sheen's Tiger Blood, But yeah, this is all the right elements in it. And for as much as, it didn't probably quite get the accolades they were hoping for, it still got a lot, but just I don't remember quite as much as like what they were maybe hoping with this film, because this has all the writings of, here you go, run the Oscars.
Well, I don't know, because it was yeah, it did well, because like I'm looking at it, had, if you can believe this, it's $87. $15 million budget, gross for worldwide, and by worldwide it only says US and Canada, so I guess back then they didn't like this didn't play in Japan, but it made like almost $44 million.
Sure.
And it became a pop cultural phenomenon, because I remember Greed is Good was everywhere for like a decade plus later. I had never seen Wall Street, and yet I knew that clip. Greed, for lack of a better term, is good. Like, holy shit.
Yeah. And well, but I mean, as far as awards go, you would think with this cast, with this crew, with this the subject matter, with this director, it got one Academy Award nomination, but it also won in that category, and that was Best Actor in a Leading Role, Michael Douglas. But that was the only nomination for Wall Street that year. Wow. Which is, with, like I said, all the elements we've mentioned tonight, you would be like, what? Also, it got nominated for a Razzie, namely Daryl Hannah's performance got a Razzie nomination. So
Yeah, that I don't know about all that. That's not right.
no,
I mean,
I don't think it
she
was.
wasn't great, but it wasn't Razzie level.
No, it wasn't Razzie. It was that's the Razzies. You know, they are what they are.
I'm just looking up the 87 Oscars and like what was, going on back then. Interesting. Oh, I guess I should look up the 88 Oscars because it's for the year before. Because I'm looking at here for cinematography, Robert Richardson for Platoon. That was the year before. Robert
Yeah.
Richardson also shot Wall Street. So yeah,
Yes, he did.
They're just
Well,
like working together for probably 3 years straight. These guys.
Well, 88 there was some competition. You had for the best actor leading role, Michael Douglas won. Tells you his performance in this. Jack Nicholson for Ironweed was up for nomination. Robin Williams for Good Morning Vietnam, which had come out. William Hurt for Broadcast News, which a lot of people thought he was going to be a shoo-in for that when that came out. I remember that. And then Marcello Mastroianni,
Marcello Mastroianni, yeah.
Mastroianni, thank you, for Dark Eyes. And so that was the competition. That was the same year Sean Connery won for The Untouchables.
The sympathy vote.
Which had a canon connection. Morgan Freeman, Street Smart, was in.
He was in The Untouchables?
No. He was in the movie Street Smart, but he was up for Academy Award.
Oh, okay.
The Christopher Reeves Street Smart movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was up for, and Moonstruck was out. So, and Broadcast News again. And then Cry Freedom with Denzel Washington was nominated that year, but didn't win. Sean Connery won for The Untouchables, which actually out of that category, that is a surprise because no offense to anyone, I haven't revisited The Untouchables, but but this is the competition that was up for Wall Street that year. So that's why I'm kind of reading these off because it's very interesting. Best Actress leading role, you had Cher for Moonstruck, Holly Hunter for Broadcast News, Sally Kirkland for Anna, Glenn Close for Fatal Attraction, and Meryl Streep for Ironweed.
Dude, and yeah, Fatal Attraction. That was another Michael Douglas. That was
another Michael Douglas, yeah.
This is a whole other conversation, but I'm just like thinking back to the good old days when the Academy Award pictures were mostly made up of popular films that people had actually seen and did really well at the box office, rather than like, oh, it's Nomadland, which played in 5 theaters and no one has seen. And there's, Frances McDormand howling like a wolf.
87 was definitely an interesting year for films because you had The Last Emperor come out in 87, which Bernardo Bertolli, excuse me, I can't pronounce anything. I can't pronounce my own last name. Anyway, he won for Best Director for The Last Emperor. And I mean, that was an interesting year, though. But just looking at the variety of films you have is always interesting. Anne Ramsey actually got nominated for Throw Mama from the Train.
There you go.
Who would have thought, right? Throw Mama from the Train actually had an Academy Award nomination, and that was Anne Ramsey's nomination there. I was trying to see what was Best Picture. I think Last Emperor won Best Picture, that year, because that was Moonstruck, Fatal Attraction, Broadcast News, and Last Emperor. And in true Oscar fashion, you had the one film that nobody saw, that it was out in like limited theaters, Hope and Glory, whatever that movie was, that did not get a huge release.
I don't know if I've actually seen that one.
That was the last. That was Bill, a young boy living on the outskirts of London, experiences the exhilaration of World War II. During this period, Bill learns about sex, death, love, hypocrisy, and the faults of adults as he prowls the ruins of bombed houses. Yeah. So.
Because it's weird because that's the same year that Spielberg's Empire of the Sun came out with Christian Bale, and that's kind of like, it's not exactly the same plot, but it's right in that same wheelhouse.
But that didn't get too many nominations either. So interesting year, 87, when Wall Street came out.
RoboCop.
Yeah, now you're talking. That should have got an Academy Award.
Nightmare on Elm Street
But-
3, Dream Warriors.
That should have got Best Song nomination, Academy. Dream Warriors, fucking Dokken, man.
Can you imagine Dokken at the Academy Awards performing Dream Warriors? Oh
That
my
would
God.
be beautiful. That would have been beautiful, man. Dokken playing at the Academy Awards, Dream Warriors. Yeah.
You had the
Right.
scene with Freddy in the tux, in the suit in
Yeah.
Dream Warriors. That
Right,
yeah, it's
yeah.
right there, folks.
It's literally right there. Roach Motel, the whole night. Yeah. Anyway,
That was
Rob.
Dream Master. That was
oh,
the
that
next,
was Dream
that was
Master.
the next
That's right.
year.
That's right. That was Dream Master. That's
Shame
right.
on you.
They blend together, those two. I know.
Fighting
But-
words, sir.
Yeah, it was fighting words. Anyway, it's late and my brain is always broken. But Wall Street, folks, your final thought, Ian, with Wall Street.
A great movie. You know, there's so many reasons to watch it and to love it that we've talked about here. But if you've never seen it, you're like, it's a movie about money. It's from the 80s. Check it out. It's I dare say, if you're disappointed, then I'm disappointed in you.
If you like Oliver Stone, if you like anybody who shows up in this film, I would recommend watch it. Even though it's 2 hours, it is a breezy 2 hours. You've got to pay attention. You may not come on the other end following completely what stocks are about, but you'll be entertained because it is. And little spoiler there, our lead character doesn't exactly have a happy ending. So, I liked that. There was still a consequence. Even after he does a specific thing, there's still a consequence for his actions. And I liked that. I liked that element because you think maybe everything's going to be all hunky-dory. And then you come to find out, no.
Well, and there's something that we didn't talk about that I know we're wrapping up here, but you know, it's almost speaks to the character of, when I say the character, like the quality of the way that Bud was raised by his dad.
Right.
That when he goes down, he's upset about it, but he takes it like a man. Like there's no like, no, this is outrageous, and I never did this, and no, he just goes away in cuffs. Because I think he realizes that what his dad had been telling him all along was like, these are dangerous people, and this is a big game you're playing. Got to be very careful because you might get taken down. And he's just like, I'm bye.
So there's still consequences to his actions, which was kind of nice to see in this. So there you have it, folks. Wall Street, our first stock it up film. So hope you enjoyed this conversation. This is a lot of fun to revisit this again. Stock market films, but I tried to pick some interesting ones, and I think we've got some interesting ones on deck. But now, as always, what's even more interesting is this is the time where I give my guests the license to shill. So, Ian, the floor is yours.
The trading floor, because
The trading floor, you got 4 minutes. No, there was the bell. So you got 30 seconds before your stocks drop. So
sell. No. My name is Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which if you're on the New York Stock Exchange is under KTS. No, I'm kidding. You can find me at kickseat.com. Mostly I'm on YouTube. If you look at YouTube and Kicking the Seat, you'll find me. I do movie reviews and interviews and live roundtables, and I'll be doing one this Thursday, possibly with Mark, but with a number of other critics as well, talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And if you've made it this far into the stream, you'll know that I'm not a big fan. But so join me then, or if not, maybe just check out the channel, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I'm also here on Mondays, hanging out with Mark, talking about movies that continue to amaze me, like either things I've never seen before or reevaluating movies that I was like, and sometimes I'm like, or but in this case, I'm like, wee.
Well put. And Dial of Destiny is one where, once again, much like a certain movie called Vacation, we may be on opposite ends of the spectrum. So should be an interesting conversation, but still friendly.
I get to be right twice. Sorry.
There it is. Zing. There it is. Oh, God. I love that. And we do get one comment from Talix who chimed in. Thank you for chiming in and joining us here, Talix, near the end. He goes, my favorite trilogy is Wall Street, Wolf, and then The Wolf of Wall Street. That's a true. That is indeed an interesting trilogy. I wouldn't mind seeing that. See, we need werewolves in the stock market. I think you're onto something there, Talix. There you go, right up the script. Wolves on the stock market. There you go, werewolves, and I think you got some good gold right there.
The Werewolf of Wall Street.
The Werewolf of Wall Street. Yeah, there you go.
Things are getting a little hairy down on the floor.
Oh, yeah, you're digging your claws into those stocks. Huh?
Yeah.
This deal has some bite to it. There you go.
Mm-hmm. We got to work in a moon pun there somewhere.
There you go, Talix. Bear market, nay, wolf market. Oh, yeah. See, you've got something going there, Talix. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks everybody for listening and supporting our little sliver of the internet, the podcast. Special Mark Productions for all the stuff. You can check it out there. We got a lot of interesting things. I got a couple interviews that I've been a little late getting posted, but those are going to be up soon. There's going to be some more reviews coming. And next week, it's going to be a comedy that I thoroughly enjoyed, Far Too Young, but now looking at it, it's still entertaining, but there is some problematic stuff in it. A lot of problematic stuff in it. But yeah, we're going to be looking at Trading Places. So that should be a fun conversation looking at that film through 2023 lens. So stay tuned for that next week, folks. 9:30 Central Time here in the Spoiler Room. So until next time, thank you, Talix. Thank you to everybody who tuned in live. Thank you to all you folks who continue to listen. Please spread the word about us. We really appreciate your support. And yeah, until next time, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.